You've surely noticed how time spent with certain people turns into a draining experience instead of pleasant interaction. One of the greatest thinkers in the history of philosophy, Arthur Schopenhauer, viewed solitude not as a deficiency, but as a privileged characteristic of those with sharp minds. From his perspective, social interactions often force us to be superficial. We put on insincere smiles, adapt to artificial norms, and leave such gatherings feeling empty and tired. If you feel more comfortable in quiet surroundings, if you prefer to avoid noisy events, there are good reasons for this. And this is not at all indicative of any shortcomings on your part. Rather, it may point to your wisdom, maturity, and self-confidence. In this text, we examine 9 psychological and philosophical reasons that explain why some people consciously avoid social contact. By the end of this reading, you may come to believe that Schopenhauer was absolutely right in his judgments. The first reason is your heightened sensitivity to the surrounding world. Our environment is constantly filled with movement, the noise of voices, and various distractions. For most people, this is merely background accompaniment to everyday life, a complex but harmless symphony of sounds. However, for those with sensitive and observant minds, this excessive stimulation becomes not just an insignificant detail, but a source of discomfort and energy depletion. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the most insightful investigators of human nature, noted that the more developed the intellect, the greater the ability to notice what remains unnoticed by others. The average person moves through the world without paying attention to background noise, empty words, the insincerity of certain smiles, or the meaninglessness of conversations that add nothing substantial. For them, noise is simply an element of the environment. But for more attentive observers, those who see beneath the surface, every sound, gesture, and interaction carries significant weight, which is difficult to bear constantly. Sensitivity to the environment is not a weakness, but a sign that your mind functions on a different level. While others seek entertainment and connections to fill time, you strive for substance. This is precisely why the presence of certain people in certain places can become overwhelming for you. You notice what remains unsaid, see empty facial expressions, sense the energy of a space much more intensely than you might wish. This can be exhausting, and Schopenhauer said that crowds are a real ordeal for deeply thinking people. This happens because human communication is often based on superficiality, words exchanged without deep reflection, social gatherings motivated by the fear of loneliness, conversations revolving around the obvious. For a person seeking depth, all of this becomes a source of disappointment. It's not about dislike or arrogance, but about a fundamental difference in ways of existing in the world. There are those who feed on noise and chaos, and those who find peace in ordered, quiet contemplation. If you feel that certain environments drain your energy, that excessive noise and empty interactions tire you, this doesn't indicate a problem. On the contrary, it may suggest that you value what is truly significant and refuse to disturb your inner balance in the chaos of mediocrity. So don't blame yourself for craving silence, for preferring fewer social contacts and more self-analysis. Society may try to convince you that isolation is a problem, but Schopenhauer teaches us that for some people, it represents the purest form of freedom. The second reason is that you value your emotional independence. Many people don't handle solitude well, experiencing an almost instinctive fear of silence, as if the absence of external voices exposes an inner emptiness they prefer not to face. They constantly seek company, approval, and confirmation of their significance. Like invisible puppets, their emotional state fluctuates depending on the mood of those around them, and without realizing it, they become prisoners of the need for recognition. But this doesn't apply to you. Schopenhauer considered such dependence a sign of weakness, a burden carried only by those who haven to learn to live in harmony with themselves. He believed that people who desperately need others will never be truly free. And in this, he was right. True freedom lies not in the ability to go where you want, say what you think, and act without limitations. Real freedom is not needing anyone for your own happiness. It's the realization that your inner world is incorruptible, that your emotional state should not depend on others' desires and whims. If you learn to enjoy your own company, if you were able to find joy in moments of solitude, this isn't evidence of any problems. It speaks to your evolution as a person. Many fear solitude because they confuse it with a feeling of abandonment. But there is an enormous difference between solitude by choice and solitude by necessity. They understood that the company of other people can be pleasant but is not a necessary condition for your existence. And this understanding, however simple it may seem, is something few manage to achieve. The modern world encourages constant communication, social networks, messaging, continuous interaction. Solitude has become almost taboo, as if those who choose it are making a mistake or living an incomplete life. But Schopenhauer viewed seclusion as a form of clarity, a space where the wisest can reflect without interference. If you realize that you prefer emotional independence to a constant need for company, it means that your happiness is not determined by other people. It means that, unlike most, you've achieved a state of inner balance available to few, and therefore solitude for you is not a punishment, but a privilege. The third reason is that you feel the need to play a role before others. From an early age, we learn that social life requires constant efforts to adapt. We smile even when we don't want to. We pretend to be interested in tedious conversations. We participate in meetings that exhaust us, simply because that is what is expected. This is the unwritten rule of coexistence. To be pleasant, to be accepted, to function in the grand social theater. But the older you get, the less patience remains for participating in this farce. Schopenhauer, always aware of the shallow nature of human relationships, claimed that society represents a stage where authenticity is rare. Most people hide behind masks, perform learned roles, and follow the prescribed script of life. They do this automatically, without even thinking about it. But what happens if you were able to see something more? If you feel the need to adjust your behavior to those around you, if every interaction requires unnatural effort, it means your mind has grasped what most refuse to acknowledge. The world values comfort over truth. Society expects your conformity, to be friendly, even when experiencing fatigue, to participate in empty conversations as if it is a vital necessity, to avoid conflict situations, to display diplomacy, to never express emotions capable of creating a tense atmosphere. But what if this constant pretense is the very source of discomfort? Over time, you begin to understand that other people, these masks no longer interest you. You reject pretense in favor of living life authentically. You need meaningful conversations about what truly matters. You need genuine connections that bring real value, that penetrate deeper than the surface level. But superficiality dominates, and the social spectacle repeats itself with each new encounter. And when honesty, depth, and authenticity become rarities, silence transforms into an infinitely more dignified alternative. Schopenhauer understood this better than most. He realized that those who see beyond social games often prefer solitude to participating in this grand spectacle of falsity. If you feel that communication requires excessive effort, if interaction with a group of people depletes rather than fulfills you, perhaps you've discovered that true freedom lies in not having to play a role. The fourth reason is that you have a developed sense of self-sufficiency. Schopenhauer said, "The less a person needs others, the stronger they become." And this is a profound truth. Society continuously instills in us the idea of mutual need for each other. From our earliest years, we learned that acceptance by the collective is critically important, that we should seek approval, follow established norms, and conform to them. Independence is viewed with suspicion, and anyone who prefers to move on their own path, not submitting to the thirst for belonging, quickly gets labeled as strange, cold, or alienated. But what do you do when the realization comes that you don't need any of this? The overwhelming majority of people rely on external stimuli to fill their inner emptiness. They need conversations, interactions, constant confirmation of their own significance. They exist for the opinions of others, adjusting themselves to others' expectations, experiencing fear of silence. Because silence exposes what they try to avoid, the need for self-sufficiency. But you are different. You feel that solitude doesn't weaken but strengthens you. It is not a punishment but a privilege. You see no necessity in communication that brings nothing, in empty words that merely fill time. You realize that with a rich inner world, the presence of other people becomes a choice, not a necessity. Schopenhauer clearly saw this reality. In his opinion, most people cling to society not out of pleasure, but out of fear. Fear of confronting oneself, fear of being insignificant, fear of discovering his own worthlessness without others. But if they experience satisfaction in solitude, it means they grasp something that is beyond the understanding of most people. It means that the external world is not necessary for you to feel complete, because they've already found everything you need within yourself. Life teaches lessons, sometimes incredibly painful ones. How many times have we invested in friendships, sincerely believing in their authenticity, only to later find ourselves used, betrayed, or rejected without the slightest remorse from those we trusted? Schopenhauer noted that a person's most serious misconception is the inability to choose friends properly. It is hard to imagine more accurate advice. Many emotional wounds could have been avoided if we had recognized the warning signs earlier, if we hadn't given new opportunities to those who had already revealed their true nature. If you've ever been ridiculed, misled, or ignored, you understand the full weight of these words. There is no harsher lesson than the one taught by disappointment in people. Over time, you come to understand that not every friendship is sincere, that many words lack substance, that numerous promises hold no value. People grow close out of self-interest, lavish compliments when it benefits them, but they disappear at the first signs of difficulty. Thus, gradually, you learn to be more selective in your social interactions. Initially, perhaps you tried to adapt. Maybe you sought to understand others, to justify their behavior, to forgive more than you should have. But there comes a moment when you grow tired of giving to others what you don't to receive in return. And then solitude begins to appear more attractive than unsuitable company. Schopenhauer was keenly aware of this. He understood that existing among other people can be exhausting, and that most human relationships are built on convenience rather than genuine connection. If they arrived at such an understanding, it doesn't mean they isolated yourself. But simply provided yourself with protection. For in the end, it is preferable to be alone than in bad company. You can stand empty conversations. Modern society glorifies superficiality. Conversations have become merely a way to fill silence, not a means of authentic communication. People talk because they consider it necessary, but rarely say anything valuable, worthy of the listener's attention. Schopenhauer viewed this as a colossal waste of time. He believed that most conversations amount to nothing more than an exchange of empty phrases, purposeless social noise. Few strive for dialogues that have real significance, dialogues that go beyond the obvious, that pose questions and explore something beyond the immediate. If you feel that most interactions are predictable, repetitive, and devoid of substance, there is nothing wrong with you. Likely, your mind simply craves something that few are capable of offering. The German philosopher believed that outstanding thinkers were destined for solitude precisely because their favorite conversation topics found no response among most people. While some discuss exclusively the weather, gossip, or mundane events, there are those who are drawn to deeper subjects. They seek to comprehend the world, explore ideas, reflect on life with an intensity that few can understand. But such an exchange of views is rare. And having realized this, you also understand that many interactions are simply a waste of energy. Have you ever felt bored in the middle of a conversation? Have you ever had the feeling that your presence is meaningless because nothing substantial is being said? Have you ever wanted to leave a social event because you felt your time there would be wasted? This happens because your mind has realized quantity is not equivalent to quality. Schopenhauer asserted that those who have something valuable within themselves don't need the noise of the surrounding world to feel complete. If you feel alienated from ordinary social interactions, perhaps this is explained by the fact that your mind functions at a different level. And probably that is why you've discovered that silence is immeasurably more valuable than meaningless words. You feel that people drain your energy. This isn't about misanthropy, but about self-preservation. There are people who demand too much. They exhaust your patience, your inner peace, your vital force. You finish a conversation more fatigued than when you began it, not because you talked too much, but because you had to take on someone else's burden. Schopenhauer understood that human communication can be exhausting, especially if it involves those who live on drama, gossip, and emotional demands. Some people need not just your company. They want to feed on your attention, your sympathy, your mental resources. They pour out their disappointment without asking permission, demand a presence you never promised, turn their problems into time that, in their opinion, you are obliged to devote to them. And if you feel the need to distance yourself from them, it doesn't mean you are insensitive or selfish. It means you learn to value your time and peace of mind. Society often confuses the concepts of availability and kindness, asserting that we should always be ready to listen, help, offer our shoulder, even if it completely depletes us. But Schopenhauer saw a trap in this. He recognized that the energy of a wise person cannot be expended on that which brings nothing in return. Time and energy are limited resources, and spending them on people who only take without giving anything in return is an impermissible luxury that a sensible person cannot afford. You are not making a mistake by trying to preserve your vital energy. The world is overflowing with emotional noise and meaningless conflicts. If you feel the need to be more selective about your contacts, if you notice that solitude and quiet restore you more effectively than any social gathering, this isn't a sign of weakness. It is a conscious choice made by someone who values their inner balance. You experience a heightened need for personal space. Not everyone finds comfort in constant closeness with others. For some people, continuous immersion in social settings is not synonymous with well-being. It is an experience that drains strength and disrupts inner peace. The constant presence of others can create a feeling of suffocation. There are people who need space, silence, and moments of self-reflection to maintain their equilibrium. Solitude is not a punishment, but a necessary state for replenishing energy and organizing thoughts. Schopenhauer viewed this need as a sign of self-knowledge. In his conviction, those who understand their own nature don't fear solitude but rather highly value it. A person who has mastered the art of deep thinking realizes that there are periods when solitude becomes a refuge, a space where the mind can expand without obstacles, where it is possible to reflect without distractions. However, most people don't grasp this truth. We exist in a world where solitude is associated with sadness and silence with awkwardness. Those who seek to set aside time for themselves are often perceived as alien elements, as people needing rescue from their own self-analysis. But why should constant presence among people be considered the natural state of affairs? Schopenhauer maintained that those who enjoy solitude are not devoid of emotions nor cold-hearted. They are simply people who don't require external noise to feel complete. If you notice that constant social interaction exhausts you, if you understand that solitude restores you more effectively than meetings and gatherings, this doesn't mean rejection of human sociality. It simply indicates that when solitude brings maximum benefit, and such wisdom is possessed by few, they realize that peace of mind is more valuable than any company. Perhaps Schopenhauer's greatest teaching is this: solitude is not a punishment, but a gift. From an early age, we taught to fear being alone. Society instills in us that happiness lies in being surrounded by friends, in a rich social life, in pursuing connections at any cost. The world exalts crowded gatherings and regards with suspicion those who choose quiet. But over time, we come to understand the truth. The most oppressive loneliness is not the absence of people nearby, but being surrounded by those who don't understand you. Nothing is more exhausting than forced socialization. Nothing is more isolating than trying to establish contact with someone who doesn't speak your emotional language. Nothing depletes more than maintaining relationships that contain nothing but noise. Schopenhauer understood this. He saw society as an enormous stage where only a few display authenticity. Why force yourself to participate in this spectacle when a more dignified path exists? If solitude brings peace, why avoid it? Choosing your own company is not a rejection of the world. It is choosing a world where you control your energy and tranquility. And then comes the understanding that peace of mind is more valuable than any company. You don't need crowds of people to feel complete. You don't need to fill an inner void with meaningless interactions. If silence gives you more than surrounding voices, if being alone with yourself brings you more joy than communicating with others, it means you've found something rare. True freedom. Schopenhauer said that wise men always walk alone. And perhaps, ultimately, solitude is not the fate of the miserable, but of those who have finally grasped what truly matters. Do you agree with Schopenhauer that the wiser a person is, the less they need social interaction? Or is this just an excuse for introverts? Let's discuss in the comments. If you found this video useful, please like it and subscribe to the channel. There are more videos on this channel that will help you become a better version of yourself.